This is not a list about the best or the worst movies of 2016. It's a list of the best and worst movies that I have personally seen in a sneak preview. Often the worst movies I've seen in a single year are movies from the sneak preview. But in 2016, also the best movie I've seen was from a sneak preview, so that was surprising. This is a 5 best and 5 worst list, since it's more interesting than a straight worst 10. Also, the worst 10 doesn't mean that they are really bad movies. Like, for example, in this year, the 10th worst would have been Nocturnal Animals, and that was actually a pretty good movie. Well, there's one reason not to talk about this movie, but besides that, this is also not a good movie. It's all in all boring. The depiction of Elvis is not very good. I would say even the Elvis in Forrest Gump is better. The only thing that makes this slightly interesting is the fact that this really happened, that Elvis walked into the White House with a gun. Just Google the picture with him and Richard Nixon and you will see that in this picture he was carrying a gun, which is kind of strange. But there's an episode of some trade show, I can't recall which one, where they actually look at the gun that Elvis was wearing and they explain the story in 5 minutes, and even that is more entertaining. This is not a movie worth spending any time on. Best number 5, A Street Cat Named Bob. This is a very sweet movie based on a real story, turned into a book, then turned into a movie. A short summary: a former junkie just escaped homelessness, gets visited by an orange cat, and despite his own situation, he decided to feed the cat. Then the cat starts following him around, and because he is making money as a street musician, the cat's always with him, and that gives him some fame, you could say. Then he gets some media attention and writes a book. That's a very short summary. There's, of course, a lot of struggle in there, but go watch it yourself. I don't want to spoil everything, but giving the trailer, you already know what will happen. I think the thing that speaks mostly to me is the fact that it shows what an effect a pet can have on a person. That it's much more than you owning an animal, and everybody who has a pet knows exactly what I mean. This is a very touching movie, I would say, and I would advise anyone to watch it. I would even say that it's a movie for kids, not for very young children, because in the beginning, of course, he recovers from a drug addiction that can maybe be difficult, but for a little bit older children, I think that would be great to show exactly what it means to have a pet and what a pet can mean to someone, and then it's not just a phase. Also, the real life person who wrote the book turns up at the end at a book signing for the book he actually wrote, but who also the character in the movie wrote. All in all, it's a very nice movie. It's sweet, it's not too long, it's just people. The acting is great. If you're interested in pets and in sweet stories, you should watch this. Worst 4, The Infiltrator. Again, this is not a bad movie, but it's really, really boring. This kind of movie has been done very often, and often much better. The actors, especially Bryan Cranston, are way better than what is delivered here. There's no mistake you can point out in this movie, but there's also nothing that stands out. It's very by the numbers. It looks okay, the set is okay, the equipment is okay, the acting is okay, but that's just it. It's just okay. Also, the bad guy is really boring and not memorable at all. So that's just, unfortunately, a nothing movie. Just sits in the middle of the score. I wouldn't say it's a waste of time, but there are much better movies out there who have somewhat the same plot. So I would not advise anyone to watch this movie. Especially if you're a Bryan Cranston fan, don't watch this movie. Your opinion about Bryan Cranston will only suffer from this movie. Best number 4, Sully. This is also the fourth straight movie based on two events, so 2016 really liked those. The movie is great. It focuses more on the investigation after the emergency landing in the Hudson River than the landing itself. The people investigating, spoiler alert, the people investigating want to blame the pilots for landing in the river because they think it is possible to return to an airport. The standout moment comes when it is shown that if you take into account the time that it takes to realize the plane is damaged and you do all the checks, then the pilots in the simulation have no chance of returning and all of them would have crashed into New York City. Tom Hanks in this movie is great, like it's Tom Hanks, but also Aaron Eckhart is great at the co-pilot, but for me personally, the standouts are the three stewardesses, Anna Kursek, Molly Hagan, and Jane Gabbard, who are great at conveying the panic and the situation with the passengers. Like, maybe that sounds mean, but in the moment when it happens, the pilots have other things to worry about. You know, they have to check the plane, they have to make plans, where to land, have to communicate, so they are distracted. The stewardesses have only the job to make sure that the passengers get in the right position and survive. And it is conveyed greatly the panic that the three stewardesses have themselves, and also how they push that back and take care of the passengers. They're just small scenes, they don't, like the focus is on the investigation, but the scenes with the stewardesses, for me personally, are really great. They show what happens in a situation away from the quote-unquote heroes. But let's be honest, it is kind of heroic that you land in a river and you have the mental strength to know that you will not return to an airport, so you land in a river. All in all, it's a great movie. How realistic the investigation is debatable. I've seen several statements online that that's not really realistic, that doesn't happen. I don't know. But if you take that with a grain of salt, it's a really great movie. The actors throughout are great. This is a movie you not necessarily should watch, but it wouldn't be a waste of time. It's a great movie. Your tolerance for this movie will depend on your tolerance for dumb jokes. I admit I have some laughs in this movie, but I also know that those are dumb jokes. They are not really deep, they are not clever, it's just stupid humor. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it is entertaining, no questions. If you have maybe a couple of beers with some friends and you want to have a laugh, you don't want to have anything complicated, anything with a message, just funny, like fail videos on YouTube, you can watch this movie. But it's not more than that. That's all this movie is. And I think that movie doesn't want to be anything more. Yeah, there are some hints for serious topics in there. Very, very small, very sparsely, but they are not followed up. They are not investigated. So this is just like dumb entertainment, and that's not like meant as an insult. It's just what it is. It's not really clever. It's just entertaining, funny, dumb, and you can watch it. Like, I know it scores lower than Elvis Nixon and The Infiltrator, but from these three movies, if I would tell you to watch one, then watch this, because it has no consequences. You have some laughs and that's it. But all in all, not really a good movie. Best number 3, Kubo and the Two Strings. This is a great animation movie. It's a mix of funny, serious, even some really creepy moments involving the two aunts from hell. The story is full of magic, wonder, told in a mystical way. It all fits together. I will not spoil too much because I would tell you to watch this movie. So if anybody out there listens to me, this is a movie you need to watch. All the characters are excellent and unique. They all fit into the story some way. I won't say perfectly because then it looks too artificial, but they fit. It's just they all work together really, really great, and it doesn't seem like it's artificial. Of course, it's artificial, it's an animation movie, but it just works together. There's no really filler, there's no jumping around. The story is told in a straight and tight way. This is very funny to watch. I would highly recommend everybody watching it. If you're interested in animation movies, you should watch it. If you like fantasy stories with a bit of magic in it, you should watch this. This is just a great movie overall. So first of all, this is a Woody Allen film, which is problematic. Then the leads, Eisenberg and Stewart, are bad. Like in this movie, I'm not saying they are generally bad actors, but in this movie they are bad. Both have already performed better, but in this movie they only show their worst trait as actors. As a result, you only see the actors on the screen, not the characters. The best performance has to be Blake Lively. At least you only see the character, not the actress, and the character is quite likable. This movie is really bad and a real waste of time. The leads are unlikable and you don't really care what happens to them. I actually thought several times throughout the movie, I hope they don't have a happy ending because they don't deserve it. They are unlikable characters. And overall, it's a bad movie, a waste of time. Nobody should watch this. Best number 2, Hell or High Water. And this is the first movie I really would say it's a must watch. It's really funny. Sometimes it's really difficult to understand, not because of the story, because of the accent that the actors have, which are quite fitting, but it could be difficult at times. A short summary, I won't spoil anything. Two brothers need money to save their mother's farm, and they rob banks for it. So a classic western. Sounds simple, and it is, but the movie lives through the characters. I would say there are 4 leads, even though normally you would say there's 1 lead or 2 leads. But the 4 lead characters for me and the 4 lead actors are Chris Pine, Ben Foster, Jeff Bridges, and Gil Birmingham. They're all fantastic. They are amazing characters. The movie lives through the conversations between them. Like they have serious talk, they have banter, they have fun. It's amazing. This is what I personally would say the old westerns were really good at. Yes, there's some shooting somewhere and some good guys kill some bad guys and the other way around. But what makes this movie great is the setup between these characters. It's something that is missing from a lot of movies today. Well, it sounds like this movie is really old. It's not that old, it's from 2016. But even in this short time span, movies from today often don't have good characters. In this movie you have 4 amazing characters. The story is simple but straightforward. They don't complicate things. They need money. There's the bank. Let's go. That's it. And then it becomes a cat and mouse game between the good guys and the bad guys. This movie is really spellbinding, so to speak. It's amazing acting from all people in it, not just the 4 leads. There are some interactions with a waitress, which is really, really funny. Overall, like I said, this is a must watch. Everybody should see this. This is great. Like Chris Pine sometimes has hit or miss movies. I won't name them here, but I'm guessing most people know him from these movies that I mean. But in this, he's great. He's a good actor. Ben Foster is my favorite in this movie. Jeff Bridges is always good. But he is the hardest to understand in this movie. And I don't know if he really talks like that or it's just his accent. Yes, they're all great. Watch this movie. It's amazing. Worst number 1, Shut In. This movie is really bad. It's extremely predictable. The twist, if you can even call it that, is obvious from the first minute. The only thing that jumps out, literally, is a raccoon who jumps out of the trash can in the dark. That was scary, if you want to call it that. The rest of the movie is just nothing. The acting is barely acceptable. The story is less than basic. I looked up the scores for this one and I cannot understand why it got such high score. Or maybe I'm missing something. But I almost fell asleep in this movie, and it should be a scary movie, so that's doubly bad. Easily the worst movie I've seen in a sneak preview in 2016, and the worst movie I've seen in 2016. There are only 2 movies I've ever seen in the cinema who are worst, and maybe we will come to them, but this is just nothing. Don't watch it. It's not even one of those horror movies who are so bad that they are actually good again. This is just... And the best movie of 2016 overall is Arrival. This is an amazing movie. It's more of the Star Trek kind of sci-fi movie where language, communications, and science are at the forefront. I mean, I like action sci-fi. That's also nice, but this is, let's just say, a thinking man's science fiction. From this point forward, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it and stop listening to me. Basically, there are 12 alien ships who land on Earth, and they open up every day, and people can go in, and that's it. So the military recruits a linguist, played by Amy Adams, to try to communicate with the aliens. So that's the start of the movie. She goes into the ship, they try to communicate with written languages, and it goes on a bit. In between these scenes, there are some scenes with a child who lies in a hospital, and it's all very melancholic in grayish colors, bluish grayish colors, and they seem out of place at first. Then, as the communication gets better and better, there are 2 key events that are happening. One is that it turns out that the Chinese are much faster at communicating with the alien because they use a game to communicate with them. And then it's pointed out by Amy Adams that is a problem because in a game there's always a winner and a loser. So automatically you act as adversaries. So the Chinese will act aggressively towards the aliens and the aliens towards the Chinese to win the game, which is not good for communication. Because you always have someone on the offensive and someone on the defense, which is not good if you want to communicate with somebody new. And the second key event is that the aliens mention that they are there to give them a weapon. And then the military freaks out completely. They want to blow up the ship and all sort of shenanigans. And then the real meat, so to speak, of the movie happens. Amy Adams experienced some changes in her mind as she learns the alien languages, and then, because she needs to stop this military attack, she remembers a meeting with a Chinese general that will happen in the future. Or that has happened in the future, would be more correctly in terms of this movie. And then she calls him, and they manage to work something out, and the Chinese stop their actions, and the US military stop theirs. And then it turns out that the aliens came to Earth to give mankind something they have already used in the future to save the alien race. What? So, as far as I can understand, is that the alien language, who is displayed in circular symbols, turns time in a circle, basically. So, from every point that you are, you can walk back. And because it's a circle, you can walk so far back that you end up in the future. And you remember things that for you haven't happened yet. But you can remember them. This is a fascinating idea. I don't even know if I understand it correctly, but it's just amazing. The movie was made by Denis Villeneuve, who is amazingly at graphics, and visually the movie is amazing. The soundtrack is also great. I also have it on a vinyl because it's just great. It had to explain what makes this movie so great. It really gets your thinking cap going, I would say. Because this is not a movie you can just sit and it just happens and then you go out and this happens and the bad guys lose and there are no bad guys in this for once. It's more a high concept movie than a actually story movie, where there is a story, but in the forefront is the concept of language and communication. And throughout, what you can say is that language is more powerful than anything else. In this movie, quite literally, since it eradicates the concept of time. But I don't know if that's the thing they wanted to tell, but when you go out of this movie, what you think is, language is the way to go, not guns and explosions. Of course, that's not always possible, as we unfortunately have seen throughout our history, but it's a movie that makes you think about a lot of things, and that is I think the highest compliment you can give a movie. And that's why it's so highly graded for me. It's based on a short story, and this short story is in a book with several other short stories, one of which is the basis for several other movies where a guy takes some drugs and then he starts to understand more and more and more and basically can manipulate the world just by thinking or something. I think one of them was called Limitless. It's interesting, but this book has some really mind-boggling stories. They are not all that crazy, but this is probably one of the most interesting books I've ever read because of the concepts or the ideas that are expressed in it. Yeah, so if you like to read, seek out the book, which contains several short stories, and read it. But if you are interested in sci-fi, if you are interested in the way Star Trek used to be, like communication, science, and going beyond action and resolving everything with guns, this is a movie for you, definitely. The acting is great throughout. Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner. It's just a great movie. Again, it's really hard to describe. I think it's one of those movies you either like or you dislike if you watch it. But I would recommend this movie to everyone. This is just an amazing